What's up, War Room? Welcome back. A very special Tuesday night episode. Dan Hanzus back with a new show with our friends from Underdog that was just announced today. The timing is immaculate. We've been doing this, I think, 3 years in a row now, where we have Dan on right around this time and we talk about how good the Jets are going to be, and then we check in like halfway through the year and like recalibrate and rinse and repeat. But Dan, first off, welcome back. And second off, congrats. Tell us about the new show.
Oh, yeah. Heed the Call with Dan Hanzus and Mark Sessler. You know, we did 12 seasons, the Around the NFL podcast, and that was an incredible ride. But it was time for something new, and this is going to be basically everything that fans loved about ATN, but at a place, Underdog, where there's no shackles. We could say what we want and talk about the game in the way people have come to expect. So it's going to be fun. As we always say, it's serious football talk, but just a touch of mirth. And we hope the fans will enjoy it. Based on the response today, they seem to be pumped up. So now the real pressure is just don't blow it, Dan and Mark. And we'll see how that goes.
So Dan, what is your summer been like, having thousands of people tweeting at you, wondering where you are, what you're doing next, articles in news outlets, I'm sure Reddick going crazy, and you kind of just have to sit on the news until the time is right. So what has this been like? I feel like you've been like Vinny Chase in Mexico on the beach, where everybody's just wondering, where is he?
Will he return? Put the
please come back. We're begging you.
We need more entourage callbacks in 2024. I'm all about that, Connor. It's been weird. It's been unpaid. I've learned a lot about the business, and I've talked to a lot of people. It's been a real process, and like you're in this business long enough. There's peaks and there's valleys, and there's a lot of things that you don't see coming at all. And going through this process, and then eventually finding Underdog and Underdog finding us, and being able to feel like we are back where we want to be, which is talking in front of a mic. In fact, this is like knocking off the rust. It's been honestly since like May 23rd since I talked about football into a microphone. So like Joe, when you hit me up, I was like, I couldn't wait to talk. And I always love talking about the Jets. But I also knew we needed to get our house in order because like you said, everyone wanted to know what was going on. And the fact of the matter is we didn't really know what was going on. We were going through the process, and we're so fortunate that we have like these fans that are so invested in what we do. And we just had to make sure we got set up the right way to give them the show that they deserve. And we think we're going to do that.
Yeah, it's very exciting that you guys landed with Underdog. As anyone who listens to this feed knows, Connor and I are big fans. We've been working with them for a while. So it's a in the family podcast now. And the fact that we're knocking off the rust talking about the Jets is exactly how it should be.
And by the way, guys, they announced Belichick last week, Underdog. And I don't know.
He was the appetizer for the main event.
Yeah, how does that feel?
I have if I do get a chance to talk to Bill, like I will talk to Bill as a Jets fan, and hopefully we can work through some things. And I will confer with Connor and Joe before that conversation if it were to happen. We'll see.
Maybe only you could bury the hatchet. It could be a little bit like Rocky IV potentially, but we'll see if we get to that conversation. All right, So our Jets. Very high expectations. Again, 2 weeks into camp, were mostly positive reports that Aaron Rodgers is still very good. Garrett Wilson's very good. They have an offensive line. However, we do need to start with the one issue that's been hanging over camp to this point, which is they traded for Reddick, who has 4 straight seasons of double-digit sacks. And we've talked a lot when we've talked about how rare it is for the Jets to have a guy who gets double-digit sacks. Even our friends John Abraham, Muhammad Wilkerson, you go back further, no one's had 4 straight years of double-digit sacks for the Jets since like the Gastineau era, like before I was born. Mm-hmm. He's still holding out. We're getting the one side of leaks that Reddick gave him their word. He'd play out his deal. The Jets, they don't want to negotiate. They're being stubborn on the money. You're getting the classic leak on both sides. I originally said the panic time was about August 5th. It's past August 5th while we're recording this. is it actually panic time yet? Or is this like inevitably something that's going to get resolved in a couple weeks? And it's like Reddick doesn't mind missing 3 weeks of camp because he's almost 30 and he doesn't really need 7 weeks of practice to be ready for the season.
Yeah, I feel like unless, and here's the thing, like you just, as someone who I try to be optimistic, but also pessimism about this regime does creep in. And I just like think to myself when the story started to come into focus, just being like, come on, guys, we didn't have this buttoned up. But I know I think the Jets side of it is that they thought it was buttoned up and there was that understanding. So it's like, can you get down on the team if maybe Reddick went back on his word, whatever it is? I'm not panicking yet. And ultimately money talks. And I think we've seen situations like this in the past with other teams and impasses like this. Usually there's a way to kind of make good a little bit with a contract tweak that gets you through the season and saves face for both sides. And hopefully that's where this is. But I don't know Reddick. I don't know his personality. And we don't know if he feels like he was kind of betrayed both by the Eagles and by a Jets team that didn't honor his wishes. So, yeah, I would say, we got the first preseason game coming up. I'll set the panic button. We call it the pee pants scale. At what point are the pants soaked? I would say if we get to August 20th, which would take us, about 3 or 4 weeks out from the season, and he's still not there, then you start to wonder about just things like conditioning. And even if he does sign, is he going to be able to play? And we have a killer schedule coming out the gate. So I'm not there yet, but it's certainly disappointing. I'm giving it 2 more weeks before I truly panic.
So, Dan, this roster, I think we all agree as Jets fans, it's the best Jets roster since 2010. And when you look at it on paper, there's not a lot you can really poke holes in. What is your biggest non-health related concern with this team going into the season? Because there's too much variance with injuries. Nobody could have predicted 4 plays in what would happen to Rodgers last year. What is your biggest concern that doesn't have to do with health with a roster that is this talented?
Well, that's the crazy thing. It's like, can I say coaching? Because I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because that would be it. And I don't mean Ulbrich. I think they have a great defensive coordinator. And Saleh, I trust, is a guy that there's a reason why they're DVOA darlings on defense, and they have an all-pro at every level of the defense. So I think the defense will remain strong, but it really obviously is on the offensive side of the ball where you really get concerned. And we could talk about it if we want, but we've all talked about it forever, like Hackett and what a bust he was in Denver, and then what a nightmare last year was once Rodgers got hurt. But Rodgers is back now, and it's the old Rodgers is the offensive coordinator. Well, he's going to have to be, because when I hear stories that happened, earlier in the summer, it's like Robert Saleh's taken a bigger role behind the scenes on offense. Like, that doesn't fill me with any level of like security. And I know opinions vary on Saleh. I am not high on Saleh. I think he's maybe got promoted one level higher than he should be. He's a great face of the franchise. He looks the part, but he lost me last year, I thought, in a lot of ways. But then I try to step back, guys, and I'm like, God damn, last year was just a mess. 4 plays in, so you want to give him the pass. But that would be my biggest concern, that the offense with the older quarterback, you're kind of going to ask Rodgers to have to be Rodgers because I don't know if the scheming is going to be strong enough to cover it up otherwise.
The Jets this offseason, they've really went full, we call it last dance Jets here, where they half measured it last year. Tyron Smith, Mike Williams, the Reddick trade, hopefully it ends with him being on the field. Trading for Morgan Moses, which we liked a lot. Then also still drafting the first round offensive lineman as further insurance after everything that we've seen. It's a very a lot of veterans, and then a lot of very young guys who need massive contracts within a year or two. So it's truly like the most 1 or 2 year window imaginable, which makes sense when your GM is like 30 plus games under 500 and your head coach is in a similar situation. Considering what the situation was going into this offseason, did you like how aggressive they were, even though these are a lot of shorter term decisions, going for Mike Williams coming off the injury he had, betting on Tyron Smith to stay healthy enough games to properly protect Aaron Rodgers? letting Huff walk and then going to trade for Reddick, who, if he plays, is probably better in the vacuum of next year, but 3 years from now won't be at the same level. We've thrown out conventional team building at this point. Once you miss on Zach Wilson, that went away. Did you like what Joe Douglas did this offseason?
Yeah, and Douglas, like Saleh, although Douglas I had more kind of faith in, and that's wavered a little bit, but still, like, overall, I think he has put them in a position to be a very good team with the roster that he's built. I loved it. I loved their offseason and the way they played it. Like, I'm also a Yankees fan, and this trade deadline just passed. And I mean, you have Soto on an expiring contract and Judge playing like Barry Bonds meets Babe Ruth. And it's like, you wanted to see them kind of sell out and like grasp the moment, and they didn't. And maybe that works out, maybe it doesn't. With the Jets, at the very least, it does feel like they understand that, because I think about, I think about Sauce and I think about Garrett Wilson, and we know how it works once these rookies get deeper into that rookie deal. Like, this is kind of their last stand with this core before I think things start to get really complicated. And Rodgers, obviously, where he's at, coming off the Achilles. So, yeah, go all in on this season. And that's why, to the earlier point about the coaching, I just wish there was more a solid base. There is this feeling, and I will a little bit of a fundamental change in a man, the events of September 11th, 2023. I've always been an optimistic Jets fan. That really, I was kind of like in Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, that part of the movie where he just gives up, and he just like goes through a few years just killing himself over and over again. Like, I felt like that last year, and some of that hangover has stuck with me, guys. Like, so there's this sense of, like, it feels a little bit like a house of cards, because there is so much of an all-in mentality, and when has this ever worked, especially for the Jets? However, I don't think it's a bad idea. We need to get a little bit lucky. We need the health to be right. We need the quarterback to be right, and we need the coaches to stay out of the way. So I like it, but also I'm kind of protecting myself a little bit. I'm trying to anyway.
What you just described, Dan, is something that Joe and